"She's dead to us," my mother said at my sister's rehearsal dinner, blaming me for a drunk driver's crash. I asked one question that froze the room. The rehearsal supper was hosted at the Waterford Estate, a setting with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a lake that appeared too exquisite to be true. Crystal chandeliers dangled from exposed wooden rafters, while white flowers adorned every accessible surface. Nobody who knew Emily Parker expected her to go above and above. She had always paid close attention to her beauty. I arrived on time, wearing the navy outfit Emily Parker had approved 4 weeks before. The parking lot was already crowded, and I could see people mixing through the windows as I moved towards the door. My stomach felt like I had eaten shattered glass, but I kept my expression bland. I had become good at it over the years. The clearance procedure for the outfit was consistent with every encounter I'd had with Emily Parker since the accident. She had texted me 3 possibilities, all in subdued hues that wouldn't catch attention: navy, charcoal, and taupe. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention away from her or the bridal party. I decided for navy since it was the least sad, and she replied with a thumbs-up emoji. There were no words, simply an acceptance that I had made an appropriate option. That dress cost me $550, which was the most I'd ever paid on a single piece of apparel. It fit wonderfully, thanks to a seamstress from a downtown Detroit shop who inquired about the event. When I told her it was for my sister's wedding, she smiled and mentioned how wonderful it must be. I smiled back, saying nothing about the knot of dread that had formed in my chest since receiving the offer. The invitation had been a surprise. I figured I wouldn't be invited at all. Emily Parker and I hadn't communicated directly in over 3 years. Our final discussion was during Dad's birthday dinner, when she asked me to pass the salt, which I did. That was it. Pass the salt. In our household, a 30-second encounter was considered conversation. But the invitation was only addressed to me, Miss Lena Parker. There is no +1. No, and I figured only my name in fine calligraphy on cream-colored card material that likely cost more per page than I spent on food in a week. I was 18 when the accident occurred. Emily Parker, 21, was home from college for the summer. We'd attended a party at Lauren Whitaker's house, one of those end-of-summer events that seemed significant at the time. Emily Parker had been drinking. She handed me the keys to her car around midnight, giggling as she fainted in the passenger seat. I was sober. That night, I had never touched any alcohol. The junction was dark, the light was green, and the vehicle drove through the red light at 65 miles per hour. Emily Parker's femur was fractured, her pelvis was crushed, and her left leg suffered chronic nerve damage as a result of the accident. The doctor stated she could walk again, but the dancing was ended. Her scholarship to Juilliard vanished, along with her career in dance. Nobody inquired what color the light was. Nobody questioned me whether I was sober. Mom discovered Emily Parker's hospital wristband containing the blood alcohol content record and concluded that was the only truth that counted. I was liable for everything that happened because I was driving. Emily Parker's blood alcohol level was 0.09. The hospital had tested her as part of its usual trauma routine. When Mom saw that number on the discharge papers a few days later, her expression shifted. She stared at me across Emily Parker's hospital room, where I had been sitting watch, and I saw exactly when she chose who was to blame. "You allowed her to drink," Mom remarked. Her voice was low and nasty. "You were expected to be responsible. She is 21 years old. She should not have drunk at all." I was accountable. I protested. "I did not drink anything. I drove her home safely." The other driver. "Don't dare to blame someone else," Mom snapped. "You were behind the wheel. You were in charge of that automobile. Emily Parker trusted you, and here's what happened." Dad had attempted to intercede. "I do not care what the police report says, honey." Mom shut him off. "My daughter's life is finished. Her scholarship is no longer in effect. Her dreams have been ruined. And it occurred when Lena Parker was driving." The rationale was absurd. However, grieving is not a rational emotion. Mom wanted someone to blame, someone she could control and punish. The inebriated driver was a stranger who had previously been handled by the judicial system. His insurance was covering the medical expenses. Mom could do nothing to satiate the wrath and grief she felt while witnessing Emily Parker suffer. But I was right there. 18, terrified, and pleading for her acceptance and pardon. An easy target. The following several months were a jumble of hospital visits, physical therapy appointments, and agonizing stillness. Emily Parker's operation was effective in stabilizing her pelvis, but the nerve damage to her leg was irreversible. She'd walk again. The physicians made it obvious. However, the exact muscular control essential for professional ballet was lost. The letter from Juilliard rescinding her admission arrived 4 weeks after the catastrophe. I watched Emily Parker read the letter. We were in her hospital room, and I was assisting her with the exercises that the physical therapist had prescribed. She opened the letter with quivering hands, read the contents, and then gazed at the wall for 20 minutes without saying anything. "Emily Parker," I finally tried. "I'm so." "Get out," she whispered gently. "Please let me out." She shouted so loudly that nurses came racing. "I do not want you here. I do not want to see you. It is your fault. Everything is your fault." She had been informed about the intoxicated driver. She was aware of the police report, his arrest, and the pending charges. The physicians had explained everything to her in detail. Knowing the facts, however, was not the same as embracing them. I'd left her room in tears and passed Mom on the corridor. She stared at me coldly and said, "You heard her. Stop coming to the hospital. You've done enough damage." The years that followed the accident were a master class in solitude. I'd been admitted to Michigan State on a full academic scholarship, but Mom persuaded me to defer and assist Emily Parker's recuperation. 1 year became 2, and then 3. By the time I attended, the most of my high school pals had moved on. Emily Parker would never speak to me unless compelled. She'd gaze through me at family gatherings, her face expressionless as if I were furniture. The deferral seems logical at the time. Emily Parker required assistance with basic things while she was recovering. Someone to transport her to physical therapy appointments, assist her upstairs and downstairs, and prepare meals while Mom was at work. "It's the least you can do," Mom explained. And I'd agree because the guilt was eating me up. Never mind that I was not guilty of anything other than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I found a job at a neighborhood coffee shop to keep myself busy and help to family expenditures. The Michigan State scholarship was deferred, but it was not assured to be fulfilled during a gap year. The university's financial aid division issued me a letter indicating that I would have to reapply and that support could not be guaranteed for future academic years. I contacted them in a panic. Margaret Ellis, a sympathetic advisor, stated that academic scholarships were offered on the basis of immediate enrollment. Because I deferred, I lost my spot in that year's cohort. I could reapply as a transfer student after earning some credits elsewhere, or I could enroll as planned and forfeit the scholarship outright if I changed my mind. "What will I do?" I questioned her, my voice cracking. "That depends on why you deferred," she said softly. "If there is a family emergency, we may be able to make an exception with the necessary paperwork. But how could I explain that my family required me to give up my future since they believed the accident was my fault? How could I explain to her that my mother had made it obvious that I owed Emily Parker this time, this sacrifice, this penance for a crime I had not committed? I ended up taking community college classes while assisting Emily Parker, and studying at night after she went to bed. The courses included fundamental English writing, beginning psychology, and general biology, all of which translated to nearly any 4-year school and kept my mind sharp. I convinced myself I was being realistic by accumulating credits while being a nice sister. The reality was, I was trapped. Mom had made it obvious that leaving would result in lifelong banishment. "If you forsake your sister now," she continued, "don't bother returning." Emily Parker's physical treatment was grueling and unpleasant. 3 times a week I drove her to a clinic 45 minutes away. She'd go into the treatment rooms for 100-minute sessions, emerging hot and fatigued, and occasionally in tears from the pain. The therapists were gentle yet forceful, encouraging her to regain movement in her crippled limb. I'd wait in the reception area, doing schoolwork or reading. Other members of the patients' families would occasionally attempt to strike up a discussion. I got adept at dodging personal queries with vague responses that indicated nothing about the circumstances at home. Another mother sat next to me at one of these sessions, around 9 months after the accident. Her daughter was recuperating from a ski accident. We talked briefly about healing timetables and insurance nightmares. Then she inquired about what had happened to my sister. "Car accident," I said briefly. "Were you there too?" she inquired, observing the fading scar on my wrist from when I underwent surgery to fix the fracture. "Yes. This must have been scary for both of you." I nodded, throat tight, unable to explain why Emily Parker no longer spoke to me. How being in the accident together had created an unbridgeable divide between us rather than shared suffering. Emily Parker's recuperation proceeded slowly. After 7 months, she was able to walk without crutches, although her stride remained uneven. After 14 months, she was able to climb stairs without help. After 20 months, she enrolled in the local community college, which was also where I was taking classes, but we carefully planned our schedules to minimize overlap. She claimed her major as marketing. It was functional and had nothing to do with dance. I once caught her in the parking lot, sitting in her car and weeping while viewing a video of herself performing the Nutcracker 4 years ago. I'd approached cautiously, hoping to provide consolation, but she saw me and drove away without saying a word. Emily Parker had transferred to a 4-year institution downstate by the time I entered at Michigan State 4 years later, and without my scholarship. She moved into an apartment near university and ceased returning home except on significant holidays. I was relieved. Living in the same house as someone who treated you like a ghost was stressful. College was lonely for me. When I arrived as a freshman, the majority of the students my age were juniors or seniors. The scholarship I had lost would have paid for tuition, housing, and board. Instead, I paid my own way through student loans and part-time employment at the university library. I lived off campus in a rundown studio apartment, surviving on ramen and cheap groceries. I studied finance since it was useful and the employment market was stable. My grades were great, with a 3.9 GPA that I kept up by pure perseverance and long nights. I had several acquaintances, but few true pals. People would ask me to parties or study groups, and I would fabricate reasons as well. The fact was that I no longer trusted people. The accident showed me that even family members may turn against you when times are tough. What would outsiders do if Mom and Emily Parker could decide I was guilty despite overwhelming proof to the contrary? I finished with honors and was immediately offered a position with a financial business in Detroit. The beginning wage was small yet manageable. I got a 1-bedroom apartment in a nice area and bought furnishings from IKEA. For the first time in years, I had a space of my own, where no one stared through me or chastised me for being. I stopped visiting home on small holidays. Only for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I'd arrive late and depart early. Emily Parker began bringing partners to these events, a succession of interchangeable guys who were kind enough. She'd laugh and joke with them, a side of herself I scarcely knew. Mom would sit me on the far end of the table, as far away from Emily Parker as possible. Dad's attempts to include me in talks were difficult. Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, was always hugging me and inquiring about my employment, but the sadness in her eyes was nearly as bad as Mom's coldness. Dad first attempted to play the role of mediator. Mom's resentment, however, was like a wave that gradually carried everyone along. He stopped offending me about the time Emily Parker began physical therapy. It was probably simpler for him to have one daughter rather than two. After college, I stayed in Michigan and worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized corporation in Detroit. I went home twice a year for big holidays, sitting at the far end of the table while Emily Parker discussed her career as a marketing director or her ideal lover, Ethan Collins. Mom would serve me last, almost like an afterthought. Dad would engage in uncomfortable small chat about weather trends. When Emily Parker's wedding invitation arrived, I looked at it for 4 days before opening it. My name was listed alone. There was no +1 given. The ceremony would take place in our hometown of Riverside, at the church where we had both been baptized. I purchased an airline ticket and requested time off from work, knowing I'd regret going but unable to explain to myself why I couldn't just miss it. The invitation package was extravagant, with thick card material with gold foil printing, an information card, an RSVP card with a pre-stamped envelope, and a map of the venue locations. Everything screamed pricey and meticulously prepared. Emily Parker had always been detail-oriented, even as a youngster. Her bedroom was carefully arranged, and her school tasks were always completed on time. Ethan Collins looked like an ideal fit for her. I had met him once before, briefly, at a family dinner 20 months ago. He was a civil engineer, stable and quiet, with a pleasant grin. He attempted to engage me in conversation that night, inquiring about my career in finance. Emily Parker quickly turned the conversation away from me, but I appreciated the effort. The wedding invitation had come on Tuesday. I noticed it in my mailbox among the bills and trash mail. My immediate reaction was to toss it away and pretend it never arrived. But something stopped me. Maybe I was curious about if I was needed there, or maybe I was hoping for an olive branch. I messaged Emily Parker personally. Received the invitation. Are you certain you want me there? She answered 6 hours later. Mom insists on maintaining appearances. You are invited. Not yet. I want you there. Not necessarily. I hope you can make it. Just a straightforward observation regarding looks. I should have understood the danger in those words. I'd spend a week pondering whether or not to go before eventually accepting the RSVP card. Part of me thought that the wedding would mark a turning point. Weddings were meant to represent fresh beginnings and family harmony, right? Perhaps seeing Emily Parker happy will soften Mom's attitude. Maybe we can find a way to be sisters again. Shopping for dresses had been an agony in and of itself. Emily Parker had supplied the 3 color selections with specific specifications. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual, and nothing bright. I went to 5 different places before finding a blue dress that suited all of her requirements. The saleswoman had been upbeat, talking about how lovely the wedding would be and how unique it was to have a sister getting married. I had smiled, consented, and felt hollow within. The trip from Detroit to Riverside was brief, taking less than 75 minutes. I had rented a hotel room instead of staying at my parents' residence. The pretext was convenience, but the truth was that I couldn't take the notion of sleeping in the same house as Mom's scorn. The motel was a Holiday Inn beside the highway, clean and unassuming. I arrived 2 days before the rehearsal dinner to avoid seeming to be a last-minute guest. The passage of time seemed to go on forever. I worked from my hotel room, took a yoga class at a neighboring studio, and ate alone at chain eateries. My phone remained virtually silent, save for business emails and a few texts from co-workers wishing me a good time at the wedding. On the day of the rehearsal dinner, I changed 3 times before deciding on the navy dress. Too early, and I'd appear desperate. Too late, and I'd appear rude. I aimed for exactly on time and succeeded, arriving into the Waterford Estate parking lot at exactly 6 o'clock. The rehearsal dinner included 72 guests, including extended relatives, close friends, and Ethan Collins' family from Colorado. As I approached the arena, I knew the majority of the faces. Aunt Carol on Mom's side waved hesitantly from a corner table. Cousin Andrew pretended not to notice me. Madison Reed, Emily Parker's college roommate, offered me a stiff smile that did not reach her eyes. I took my allotted place at a table near the kitchen doors, away from the head table, where Emily Parker and Ethan Collins would sit with both sets of parents. The location seems purposeful. A couple I didn't recognize sat next to me and introduced themselves as Ethan Collins' aunt and uncle from Denver. They were kind, inquiring about my flight and career, oblivious of the familial issues that had forced me into exile. Their names were Robert and Susan Hayes. Robert ran a hardware shop in Denver, while Susan taught elementary school. They were kind and conversational, thrilled about the wedding. Susan showed me images of their 2 boys, who are both married and have their own children. "Are you on the bride or groom's side?" Robert inquired happily. "Brides," I explained. "I am Emily Parker's sister." Susan's face lightened up. "Oh, incredibly amazing. Emily Parker is very gorgeous. We met her last Christmas when she and Ethan Collins came to visit. She's really nice and sweet. You must be really proud of her." I managed to grin. She worked so hard to be where she is. "And what are you doing, dear?" Susan asked. "I am a financial analyst in Detroit." "Oh, how fascinating. Are you enjoying it?" I did it, actually. My job was one of the few things in my life that seemed simple and straightforward. Numbers did not lie. Financial statements presented coherent narratives. Market trends followed a logical pattern. It was comforting to know what to expect. We had a good conversation throughout the appetizer dish. Bruschetta with fresh mozzarella and tomato. Robert shared a humorous story of a wedding tragedy involving a missing ring and a golden retriever. Susan inquired whether I was seeing anybody special, and I evaded with practiced grace. Other tables in the room were abuzz with chatter. I recognized Emily Parker's college friend, Madison Reed, who was holding court with a group of women near the windows. Cousin Andrew sat at a table with other cousins from Dad's side, folks I had grown up seeing at family gatherings but who now scarcely noticed me. Aunt Carol caught my gaze from across the room and offered a little wave. She seemed uneasy, trapped at a table with Mom's friends, who were most likely hearing about how much of a burden I'd been since the tragedy. Aunt Carol had attempted to remain impartial throughout the years, but she'd been exhausted by Mom's incessant story of my guilt. The sight was stunning. Large windows looked out over the lake, which mirrored the evening light in orange and pink. The tables were adorned with gorgeous arrangements of white flowers, including roses, hydrangeas, and baby's breath. String lights had been draped from the exposed beams, casting a comforting glow as dusk approached. Emily Parker had always had good taste, and it seemed that Ethan Collins had the money to satisfy it. I was curious as to how much all of this cost. The venue alone probably cost $25,000. Add in the food, the bar, the flowers, and the photographer who is presently touring the room, getting candid shots. I had heard Dad indicate that Ethan Collins's family contributed heavily to the wedding money. His father had a thriving construction firm in Colorado. I didn't add anything. Of course, I hadn't been asked to join the wedding party. There's no surprise there. Emily Parker had 6 bridesmaids, all of whom were either college friends or colleagues. Madison Reed, her 4-year roommate, served as her maid of honor. They had remained close after together and celebrating each other's graduation, going on girls' excursions accomplishments. I had seen photographs on social media. Emily Parker had never unfriended me, but she had long ago changed her settings so that I couldn't remark or respond to her postings. Pictures of wine nights, beach getaways, and bridal showers that I had not been invited to. Emily Parker is happy and carefree, surrounded by people who adore her. Dinner service started without incident. The cuisine was fantastic. Filet mignon with roasted veggies, Caesar salad, and delicious bread. I ate carefully, attempting to enjoy the dinner despite my mother's gaze from across the room. She donned a burgundy dress that complemented Emily Parker's color scheme, and her hair was arranged in exquisite waves. She appeared gorgeous yet frigid. During the main meal, Ethan Collins' father stood and gave a toast. He was a cheerful man with a booming laugh, telling him how Ethan Collins had contacted him after the first date to inform him that he had met his future bride. Guests laughed and cheered. Emily Parker flushed and leaned against Ethan Collins' shoulder. They appeared to be happy together, and I had a complex range of feelings that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then Mom got up. According to the program next to my water glass, she was not scheduled to speak until after dessert. Emily Parker was astonished, her grin weakening slightly when Mom tapped her fork against her champagne flute. The room became silent. "I'd like to say something while everyone's here," Mom said, her voice calm. She was not looking at Emily Parker, she was gazing right at me. My throat closed. "Most of you are aware that our family has been through some difficult times," she said. Emily Parker overcame a devastating tragedy at the age of 21. An accident that ended her professional dancing dreams. The room's temperature appeared to plummet. I could sense people shifting in their chairs and bewilderment spreading over the audience. This was hardly the traditional rehearsal dinner speech. "Many of you are unaware of who caused the disaster." Mom's voice became harsher. "My other daughter, sitting right there, drove the car that night. She ruined Emily Parker's future. She took all my lovely daughter had toiled for since she was 4 years old." I couldn't breathe. The silence was deafening. "I invited her tonight because Emily Parker insisted," Mom explained, her mouth twitching. "However, I want everyone here to realize something. To us, she is dead." Someone gasped. "She has been dead to us for 14 years. I believe it was Aunt Carol." Ethan Collins' mother seemed frightened. Dad sat still, his face gray. Emily Parker stared at her plate. "I don't recall standing up. I can't recall walking from my table to the center of the room, where I could see everyone. My legs seemed divorced from my body, as if they were moving on autopilot while my head was racing." Mom's cheeks was flushed with righteousness. She seemed triumphant, as if she had finally revealed something she had been keeping quiet for years. Around us, 72 people were waiting to see what happened next. I gazed at Emily Parker. She still refused to meet my gaze. Then I looked at my mother and asked the one question that mattered. "Which color was the traffic light?" Mom blinked. "What about the traffic light?" I repeated it louder. "What color was it when we approached the intersection?" The look of uncertainty on her face was almost funny. "That is not correct. You were driving. You were accountable." I said that according to the police report, the other motorist ran a red light. My speech sounded weird and too calm. He was doing 65 in a 40 zone. He failed the field sobriety test. His blood alcohol level was 0.18, little more than twice the legal limit. I removed my phone from my purse. My hands were shaking, but I was able to open my email and access the PDF I'd been lugging about for 14 years. The police report. When I became 18, I requested a copy, wanting to see the truth written out in official language. I said, "The accident was ruled his fault. He spent 20 months in jail for vehicular assault. His insurance covered Emily Parker's medical expenses. All of this information is public record." Mom's face had changed from flushed to pale. "You were still driving?" "I was sober," I explained. "My blood test came back absolutely clear. Emily Parker had been drinking. She is the reason I was driving at all. She handed me her keys since she knew she couldn't drive." I turned to address the audience. 72 faces gazed back at me, each with a different expression of astonishment and anguish. "I was 18 years old," I explained. "I did everything correctly. I was the designated driver. I obeyed traffic laws. I wore my seatbelt. The light was green. A drunk motorist ran a red light and struck us on Emily Parker's side of the vehicle. I had a concussion and a fractured wrist. Emily Parker's injuries were severe because that is where the collision happened. It was tragic. This was not my fault. The hush that followed was different than before. This one seemed like the moment before a thunderstorm. "You never even asked me what happened," I murmured, turning back to Mom. "You observed Emily Parker's injuries and assumed I was responsible. You forced me to postpone college to assist with her recuperation. You treated me like a criminal within my own house. You removed me from family photographs. You've stopped celebrating my birthday. You avoided stating my name by introducing me as the daughter who still resides in Michigan. Aunt Carol was openly sobbing now. Dad held his head in his hands. I kept silent because I felt like I deserved it somehow. I replied that if I'd been a better driver, I'd have noticed the vehicle sooner and swerved differently. I've spent 14 years thinking what I could have done better. My voice cracked. I swallowed hard. But I was 18, Mom. I was your daughter. I was also hurt. I'd experienced nightmares for years. I still stiffen up at junctions. I needed you, and you abandoned me because it was simpler to blame someone than to acknowledge that horrible things really happen. Emily Parker cried. Despite the fact that she had turned away from the room, I could see her shoulders quivering. Ethan Collins wrapped his arm around her and was absolutely lost. Mom opened her mouth and then closed it. No words came out. I came tonight, hoping that enough time had passed, I explained. Perhaps you were ready to be my mother again. Maybe Emily Parker was ready to be my sister, but you chose to embarrass me in front of everyone. I grabbed my handbag off the table. I'm finished, I said. I'm finished apologizing for something that was not my fault. I'm done playing the ghost at your dinner table. I'm over waiting for you to love me again. I stared at Emily Parker one final time. I'm sorry you were hurt. I've been regretful every day since it happened, but I am not sorry for living. And I am not going to continue torturing myself because you need someone to blame. I moved towards the exit. My heels tapped on the wooden floor, each step echoing in the eerie calm. Nobody attempted to stop me. Nobody said my name. I got to my rental car before I began trembling so violently that I had to wait in the parking lot for 30 minutes. My phone started vibrating before I could catch my breath. I didn't recognize Aunt Carol or Cousin Andrew's phone numbers. I shut it off and drove back to the motel. The wedding was set for tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I didn't intend to attend. I slept poorly, waking up every few hours to look at the ceiling and relive the confrontation in my head. Part of me felt awful about creating a scene. The rest of me felt lighter than I had in years, as if I had finally let go of a burden I had been carrying since I was 18. When I switched on my phone the next morning, it showed 51 missed calls. Most came from family members. 3 were from a group called Emily Parker Cell. I listened to her voicemail while sipping awful hotel coffee. It's me. Her voice was husky, like if she had been weeping. I am aware that you will most likely not be present tomorrow. I do not blame you. I just need to tell you something. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I knew it was not your fault. I had always known. While I was in the hospital, the doctors informed me what the police report indicated. But Mom was furious, and it was simpler to let her be mad at you than at me for drinking. I was cowardly. I've been a coward for 14 years. There was a prolonged pause. I could hear her breath. I let you take the blame because I felt humiliated. She added, I damaged my own life by becoming drunk and handing you my keys. You rescued me from a DUI. You undoubtedly saved my life by driving, and I reciprocated by pretending you didn't exist. Another silence. I don't expect you to forgive me, she explained. I don't know what to ask, but I needed you to know I knew the truth. I had always known. And what Mom did last night was terrible. I should have stopped her. I should have stopped all of this years ago. The voicemail has finished. I sat on the hotel bed for a while, gazing at my phone. My return trip to Detroit wasn't until Sunday evening. The wedding would start in 4 hours. I saw Emily Parker at 21, intoxicated and hurt, seeing her dreams fade in a hospital room. I reflected on her decision to let me take the responsibility. I reflected on 14 years of quiet, avoidance, and carefully kept distance. Then I remembered the girl who practiced ballet in our shared bedroom, and allowed me to see despite the fact that I was the obnoxious younger sister. The girl who taught me how to braid my hair, shared her Halloween candy, and protected me from bullies in elementary school. I didn't attend the wedding, but I texted Emily Parker's number. I accept your apologies. I am not ready to see you yet, but perhaps someday. I hope your day was all you hoped it would be. She answered instantly. Thank you. I'll wait for as long as you need. 4 months later, Emily Parker called me again. She and Ethan Collins had settled into their new apartment in Colorado Springs. Mom and Dad were heading to therapy. Mom wrote me a note. Emily Parker had a copy if I needed it forwarded. Would I be willing to chat on the phone sometime? I answered. Maybe. 8 months later, Emily Parker flew to Detroit. We met in a coffee shop near my flat and sat across from each other at a little table by the window. She walked with a small limp, more noticeable than I recalled. Her face seemed older, but her eyes remained the same. We spoke for 4 hours. She informed me about the guilt she had carried. How it had ruined everything nice in her life. How she attempted to conceal it by pretending I did not exist. Mom's wrath had become a barrier she'd used to avoid facing the reality, which meant acknowledging she had ruined her own goals. I told her about my loneliness and vacations spent in vacant flats. How I taught myself not to expect anything from relatives. How I established a life in Michigan since it was far enough away that unexpected visits were difficult. We did not exchange hugs as she went. We did not make promises we were unable to uphold. But we decided to speak again in a month. The reconstruction was gradual. Some familial connections never healed. Mom and I talk maybe 3 times a year, and the chats are awkward and guarded. Dad tries more, but the gap between us may never be bridged. Aunt Carol now sends birthday cards, and Cousin Andrew asked me to his wedding last year. Emily Parker and I speak every couple weeks. She returned to Detroit twice more, and I saw her in Colorado once. Ethan Collins is courteous to me in a way that indicates Emily Parker told him everything. Their daughter was born 3 years after the wedding, and they requested me to be her godmother. I said yes. The scars are still present. I still get anxious at crossings. I still get a flutter of dread when I see Emily Parker's name on my phone, but the weight is gone. I bore a terrible load of unwarranted guilt from the ages of 18 to 32. I didn't get my family back totally. Some things, once broken, cannot be completely mended. But I got myself back. I had the truth acknowledged. And in the end, that had to be sufficient. When I last saw Mom at a neutral family event planned by Aunt Carol, she took me aside before I left. Her face appeared worn and older than her 65 years. I apologize, she said. The words sounded rusty and unpracticed. I was mistaken. I was completely incorrect about everything. I nodded. I understand. Will you forgive me? I honestly considered it as I stood in Aunt Carol's driveway, automobile doors slamming in the background. I'm working on it, I eventually admitted. But it'll take time. She nodded as tears streamed down her cheeks. I understand. Take as much time as you need. I drove away from that gathering emotion, which I hadn't had in years. Not hoping for a return to the status quo. That family died 14 years ago, buried in the ruins of that crossroads. But I am eager for something fresh, based on truth rather than blame. Sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes there is no one to blame, only circumstances, terrible luck, and split-second timing. The drunk driver who hit us completed his sentence, and became sober, writing me an apologetic letter during his stay in rehab. I did not react, but I preserved the letter. I also preserved the police report. Not because I need to establish my innocence again, but as a reminder. A reminder that my truth was always correct, even when no one believed it. That being silent did not maintain the peace. It simply allowed the falsehoods to establish deeper roots. The girl I was at 18, afraid, heartbroken, and longing for love, deserved better. My current self is aware of this. Finally, after 14 years, my family is beginning to comprehend it. It's not the ending I would have preferred, but it is the reality, and truth I've discovered is more valuable than false peace.